So there's this podcast, you've probably heard of the Pod Save America thing. It's basically just like some super milquetoast liberals and their perspective on politics. And everybody is pissed right now because they did this interview with a couple campaign staffers from Kamala's campaign. And I haven't watched it. I don't plan to watch it. Those are not the type of people that I really care to hear anything from. But the essential gist of it is that, they just sort of finger pointed and just kind of misdiagnosed the whole problem for like 90 minutes straight, rather than taking any responsibility for the fact that they were chasing the wrong voters. They weren't being upfront about how poorly they were doing the entire time. Apparently, their internal polling never had Kamala above Trump, which a lot of people are saying like, oh, this just means that they never thought they were going to win, or that it makes their strategy of running to the right make even less sense. But I don't know if that's true, because if they never had Kamala above Trump, then it makes sense that they would try to chip away at some of Trump's voters and run to the right. I mean, the other theory is that if you run to the left and try to pick up voters that you're not getting there, you could have won overwhelmingly. And that's what I think is the case. But it's not like unthinkable that because Trump was ahead, they figured that they have to kind of chase his lead. That sort of makes sense to me. But, they just essentially took no responsibility and did not address the fact that they ran to the right and were chasing these mythical Trump voters or undecided Trump voters. And basically they just fucking wasted $1 billion. So it's like there's a lot of criticism at this point, and this is kind of this gets to the core of the debate of what's going to happen with the Democratic Party. The problem is that the top communicators in the party, like these Pod Save America guys or people on MSNBC, they're never going to address this, which is that, these people made stupid amounts of money. These campaign staffers, consultants, all of the people in this sort of Democratic orbit. I mean, they were giving these artists millions of dollars, literal millions of dollars. I think they paid Megan Thee Stallion $1 million, if not more, to perform at Kamala's rally. So they're spending insane amounts of money, and people are getting rich off of this campaign, and all the while they were running a losing campaign and they knew it. And it's like, at the end of the day, like, that is the problem, regardless of what we want to say about Trump and the sort of radicalization that takes place there and the misinformation and all of that. And they spend a lot of money too, and they have all their creepy donors. But at the end of the day, like, Democrats, Kamala raised $1 billion just within those few months that she was running. And at no point did they take the lead. Like, that's insane. What the fuck were they spending this money on?
That's insane that they never took the lead with that much money invested. Yeah, I'm familiar with Pod Save America. I've listened to a couple podcasts when they had someone on I wanted to listen to, or were covering a subject. I agree that they're super milquetoast, and I too don't really need to hear from them ever. They're the exact kind of Democrats that got us into this, and it sounds like there's yet another example of that. Having people from inside the campaign would have been a perfect opportunity to call them out, to ask why they went after the right voters, and not the right voters, but voters on the right. And sounds like they didn't. I understand what you're saying, that, yeah, maybe it makes sense if they never had the lead to try and chip away at Trump's voters, which it does make sense on paper. But like we've both talked about before, you're not going to get that. It's not going to win. That makes sense, logically on paper, if you've never met a Trumper. That wild card of what a Trumper actually is kind of screws that up. They would have done so much better going after, people who don't normally get out and vote, or, first-time voters or whatever. But, these are the Democrats that got us where we're at, and it's not terribly surprising, unfortunately, looking at their history. I guess it's surprising that they could do the same campaign running against the same guy with the same tactics 3 times in a row and not learn from it. So, yeah, we're all fucked. That's my only takeaway from this whole election. It's just so disheartening that they clearly, after the 3rd time, have not figured anything out yet. I've heard they're starting to talk about who's going to be the new leader of the Democratic Party and this and that, and some of the names they're putting forward are pathetic, and it's the same old shit. They're not doing anything to change or shake things up at all after this like devastating loss. I don't know. You would think at this point they would realize that, but I don't think they're ever going to. I think the only chance of really beating the Republicans now is a third party. I mean, is it going to happen? I doubt it, but we know the Democrats can't do it.
Well, and what it really is class solidarity. So these consultants, these people in the upper echelon of the Democratic Party, they recognize what's happening. They know what happened. They know that their ideology kind of walked us into a loss on this because they were in control of the campaign the whole time. There was no point where the Democratic consultants and just the sort of Democratic operation in general wasn't in control of the Kamala Harris campaign. You could argue even Joe Biden was a little bit more detached from that, which is why Bernie and AOC were concerned when there was all this pressure for Biden to drop out. That was why they said they stuck by him, is because they didn't trust the Democratic machine to select his replacement. And they sort of sensed that there was some kind of coup happening in the wrong direction. And so where we're at now is that these people lost. They were in control the entire time. They lost. They know they lost. But at the end of the day, they also recognize that they are worse off if some kind of real redistributive, visionary steps into power in the Democratic Party. They're better off with Trump, because Trump, at least on the economic level, on the tax bracket level, Trump is going to serve their interests more than Bernie Sanders or somebody of his ilk. So their number one priority is to prevent that. And so you have class solidarity, and that's probably the reason that we saw so much similarity between Kamala's campaign and Trump's campaign as well. Partially because they knew that this donor money was coming from rich people, and so they didn't want to offend the donor class too much. And so they tried to play it pretty close to, the things Trump was saying or the economic policy that you would hear from Trump. Whereas Trump, was going crazy with this stuff about tariffs, and nobody wants to hear about tariffs. So Trump is genuinely kind of a wild card on some of this stuff. But, at the end of the day, it's class solidarity. And when there's these moments of uncertainty in the Democratic Party, these people move in, and they know that their job is to turn the conversation away from economic populism. There's an amazing quote from Hillary Clinton that's going around back in 2016, where she said, if we were to enact Bernie Sanders' plan to break up the big banks, is that going to end sexism? Is that going to end racism overnight? No, of course not. And that is the perfect encapsulation. People are rightfully pointing to that as that's woke. That's wokeness. You know what I mean? Like, Hillary Clinton is the one who ushered that in, because Bernie Sanders was trying to shift the national conversation to something that was more economic populist, which would have been a winning message. And the Democratic, creeps always have to move the conversation away from that. And that's exactly what they're doing now. It's entirely cynical. They don't believe what they're saying. But, they have to prevent the party from going in a more populist direction, and they know that that's what they're threatened with at a moment like this.
That's a really good goddamn point. That's exactly what it is. Class solidarity. At the end of the day, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, white, black, gay, trans, straight, demi, whatever, all that matters at the end of the day is green. And that's all that will ever matter.
Well, and also, too, to speak more on the tariffs and various kind of disastrous ideas that Trump has like that, and how that factors into the class solidarity. Because Trump does the same thing. Trump is all about class solidarity. That was his number one first priority when he stepped into office last time, was to do the tax cuts for the rich. That was what he promised them, and that's what he gave them. And the tariffs, like I said, the tariffs aren't really going to benefit anybody. Obviously, the ones who are going to lose out the most are the poor people. Those are the ones who are going to have the bottom dropped out from underneath them. But, rich people are basically, if consumers aren't able to consume, then their bottom line's going to be hurt as well. But they've already said that they're going to, they're still going to have their money and make their money anyway. But it does make you wonder how much. How does Trump wanting to do tariffs, which doesn't really benefit anybody, how does that factor into the obvious class solidarity that makes up the Republican Party and stuff like that is what I think is a little appealing about Trump, because on its face, that is not something that benefits the wealthy class. But the problem is you just can't really make the argument that it benefits anybody. You know what I mean? If Trump was making moves like that in a way that was genuinely redistributing wealth downwards, then it would be great. And who gives a fuck if he's a Republican? If he's doing, that's all I want. I want wealth to be redistributed downwards. But for these no matter what Trump does, wealth is going to be transferred upwards. That's what happened during COVID. That's what happened because of the tax cuts. Every one of his policies ultimately points to that. And so whatever this sort of scheme, this harebrained scheme that they have in mind with these tariffs, ultimately it's going to do the same thing. Probably what's going to happen is they're going to enact the tariffs, everything's going to be a disaster, and they're going to reverse them immediately and move on. That's what I would predict. But if that doesn't happen, I do kind of wonder what the game plan is there.
Did you see that Lauren Boebert tried to follow Matt Gaetz' lead and set up a cameo, trying to grift some more right-wing dupes out of their hard-earned money? It didn't work for it, though, because it had to be shut down because it's illegal for a woman in her position. She's not allowed to take money for public speaking at all, because that would devolve into bribery real quickly. So she had to shut it down. There's also concerns, I guess, because in her position, they're only allowed to make a certain amount of money per year outside of their main income. I think it's $35,000 or something like that. And I guess she would have broken that. But also she can't take money for public speaking and this and that. And so she was forced to shut it down that same day or the next day, something like that. Another win for Boebert there.
I had not heard about that. I'm surprised that there are even that many rules about what type of speaking they're supposed to do or what type of money they're supposed to make while out of office. I'm not really sure how that works, given that plenty of them are doing that shit all the time. But I mean, those are the type of regulations that should be in place. It's even more funny, though, how all of these elected officials, no matter who they are, but especially idiot Republicans, they just do these things without even looking into whether they're actually allowed to, they scream about corruption all day. And then it's like someone offers a fucking trip to the Bahamas or whatever, with some Supreme Court justices to have mimosas and talk about Roe versus Wade. And they just don't. They're just like, yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, they don't give a shit. They just dive right in without even thinking about it. I would say they know what they're doing, and they're just hoping they get away with it, that no one cares or they don't get caught or whatever. But I don't even think it's that. I think they see dollar signs, and that's all they think about, and they get swept up in the moment and then maybe think about it afterwards. If then even.
Yeah, really just if they get caught. If they get caught, then they're like, oh, I didn't, you know what I mean? They just do things and just see if anybody calls them out for it. That's exactly what Kyrsten Sinema was doing. Kyrsten Sinema was she was going on cruises with Republicans and shit. They were flying her out like fucking Harlan Crow and Republican donors and shit. She was taking all that shit. She was like, hell yeah, I came here to get rich, bitch.